John.
Hey, John, this is Jeremiah from Bombad Radio.
Hey, Jeremiah, how are you?
I am doing pretty good.
Good.
So I've just introduced you on the recording, talked about your books and how you are honestly, you've written more books than I think pretty much everyone but maybe 3 Star Wars authors in existence.
Well, if you count all the little small ones, that's true, but most of mine were pretty small books.
True. But so were also like a lot of Kevin Anderson's where he wrote Young Jedi Knights and so on. And so I think he's number 1, and then I believe Troy Denning and Kevin Anderson's wife has written technically more than you have. But for some reason they get all the more attention.
Well, that's all right. I don't mind.
So the first things we're going to talk about is Galaxy of Fear, because this is an 11-book, essentially Star Wars Goosebumps series.
Right.
And I remember reading it when I was a kid. I was going around the library, and I saw the old, Glove of Darth Vader series, Mission of Mount Yoda ones, the other young adult ones, and then I wanted more, and so I found your series and read all the way through it. And in some ways, I liked it a lot more because it was a series that fit. It didn't have to fit in canon, and no one cared. It was just fun for what it was.
Yeah, that was actually the goal.
So that was the goal. You wanted a series that people could just read in. It's Star Wars, but it doesn't. No one really has to try to make it fit somewhere.
Right. You know, I talked with Lucy up at licensing at Lucasfilm, and I talked with Bantam at that time, the publisher Bantam Doubleday Dell, and we wanted to do a series that would stand alone, that would fit in the universe comfortably if anyone wanted to pay attention. In fact, I think all the ideas are mine, except that Lucasfilm had the idea of using a character named Hool. And basically they threw that at me and said, what can you do with it? And so I came up with the idea that became Star Wars Galaxy of Fear. And I wanted to make sure that every book included at least some cameos from some of the standard Star Wars characters, some of the main characters. Not always in big roles, but at least that they would appear in the series so that anybody who really wanted to make connections could. And I tried as best I could to fit it into the timeline as it existed at that time. But again, you could completely ignore all that and the books would still work.
So just rewinding just a little bit before that, how did they first approach you, or did you approach them for writing Galaxy of Fear? What was the original idea to create I'll say it again, Star Wars Goosebumps series at that time?
Yeah, that's how it was pitched to me. You know, my background with Lucasfilm was that I used to be the executive editor of Time Warner audiobooks. I made books on tape, essentially. And this is years ago. We were looking to expand the market for books on tape. And a couple of us inside my company had the idea to look for products like comic books and make them into radio plays. But instead of broadcasting them, we'd actually put them on tape and CD right away. I was a Star Wars fan, and at that time, the series Dark Empire was huge in comic books. A publishing company called Dark Horse Comics had published Dark Empire, and it was a fan favorite, not just among Star Wars fans, but among comic book fans in general. And so I pitched the idea of taking Dark Empire and making it into what was essentially a radio play, but not for broadcast. Lucasfilm liked the idea, and so I was lucky enough, I got to do the adaptation. I wrote the adaptation for several Star Wars comic books into audio. That led to Lucasfilm asking me if I'd write the books. Basically, they said, we'd like the creative side of what you're doing. Do you want to do some projects outside of your company? And I said, yeah, I'm a Star Wars fan, absolutely. They came to me and they said, we have the idea of doing this kind of scary stories, and they use the same phrase you did, Goosebumps style stories in the Star Wars universe. And I loved it. So basically, they pitched that concept and the idea of using Hool to me, and then I ran with it. I wrote some concepts. They liked them. They sold it to Doubleday Dell, and off we went.
So your company was the one, you already mentioned how you did Dark Empire. You also did Tales of the Jedi and Dark Forces and those ones. Was your company the one that also did when I was a kid, there was the audiobooks of the Zahn trilogy, but they were the condensed version with, a little more dramatized than we have now, but not by much.
No, that was a different company. And frankly, that was one of our motivations for looking outside of the regular books, because to be honest with you, a different company had the rights to do those books on audio. So they did what I would consider straight audio versions of those books, which were great, but they had maybe a little bit of dramatization. Mostly it was a person reading the book. We did dramatizations, and so we had to find products that weren't already bought out, and nobody had thought of doing comic books yet, and so we took it and made something out of it.
And then you also tackled Dark Forces, which was the computer game / book / comic book.
I recall doing all the Tales of the Jedi. That was kind of fun. I don't recall doing Dark Forces, to be honest with you, but it was a while ago, and I did a lot of Star Wars stuff.
Yeah. You also got involved in the Return of the Jedi radio drama that was finally done, 13 years after the original ones were done. And you stepped in because of Brian Daly's... Well, Brian Daly was dying at the time.
Yeah.
I think he died before it was done.
Yeah, that's the sad part of the story. For me, it was a nice, lovely moment in my career. Sad for the opportunity, but yeah, it was fun. He had written most of it already. Not all of it, but he'd written quite a bit. And the director and Lucasfilm wanted it finished, and they wanted some rewrites on it. So they called me in, and I got to finish the actual script and go back in and fill in some blanks and write some really fun stuff for it. And then I got to sit in on most of the production, which was a lot of fun.
And I believe you also got to add in some characters like Arika, who in that radio play was Mara Jade, if I recall right.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it was fun. It was a blast. I got to write a couple scenes with Boba Fett that were fun. Fun for me because of being able to play with that character a little bit.
So, when you were writing these Galaxy of Fear books and working with these radio dramas, you just mentioned how you like playing with Boba Fett and you added Mara Jade and so on. Which are some of the characters that you were most excited just to play with? Be they a big character or they be a small character that you just get to do some extra stuff with? Because by then there really wasn't that much... There wasn't a lot of Star Wars stuff out there as opposed to now.
Yeah, it was kind of at the front end of a lot of books. Now there's a ton. It was before the X-Wing series. It was before, it was after Kevin J. Anderson started his stuff. It was, several years after Timothy Zahn's stuff. So there was already an established sort of, you can't call it canon, but there was the kind of list of what I would call the important apocrypha, the stuff that eventually would not be canon, but at the time was the standard for what people were doing with Star Wars outside of the movies. And I mean, the Galaxy of Fear was meant to be for younger kids, so I never had the illusion it was going to kind of reach that status, but I wanted it to work. I wanted it to be important inside its area. So I played around with different characters. I'm going to embarrass myself as a Star Wars fan because it's been so long since I focused on it, but I loved being able to make Wedge Antilles an important character. I made the main characters the sort of featured in the first book, Eaten Alive. Then I started just finding different characters that I could work with. And Lucasfilm was amenable to pretty much anything that I did as long as they had a couple rules, but as long as anything I wrote fit into what was then perceived as a timeline, and as long as I didn't kill anybody off without permission. So
they had to fit in the timeline and no killing people off without permission.
Right.
Was there anything else that they told you no for that you had in your brain?
Yeah. One thing is I had a really cool idea that would never fly. But they said no more life deaths because Chewbacca had a life debt with Han Solo, so the story went, and enough of that. And no ghosts, they said. They were, and I couldn't tell at the time if they were unhappy with the concept of ghosts and the Force, given the way the Return of the Jedi ended, or if they wanted to reserve that for themselves. I really never knew what their plan was, but I couldn't have any real ghosts. And also, as I said, I had a really cool idea for a life debt that they just said no. No one's allowed to touch that because we've had enough of it.
It's kind of entertaining because they had you write 11 books that were supposed to be.
It was 12.
12 books. Yeah. That were scary for kids and so on, and then they never really hit that same subject again until Red Harvest and Death Trooper. But those were quite a bit different beasts, of course. But it's weird that they spent almost 20 years in between.
Well, I think they were trying to hit a trend, and the book sold well enough. I was happy with them marketing-wise and financially. But I think the truth is they went farther than they thought they would, because I originally wrote one and they commissioned it for 6. They asked me for 6 books, and they sold well enough in the middle of writing the first 6, they asked me to write more. So it ended up being twice what they expected to run. And I think that they were just, wanted to tap into that market. But, I mean, I'm obviously was never in charge of anything marketing-wise for Lucasfilm, but my sense is they didn't want to ever get bogged down in any one area. So it worked for a while, and when it was done, and they just moved on to other things.
We're going to move just a little bit for a couple questions to your audio dramas, because recently there was an awesome Humble Bundle, and a lot of people were able to get your audio dramas via Humble Bundle, because there's Dark Empire on there, Tales of Jedi on there, Crimson Empire, which I'm not sure if you did, but Dark Forces is one. There's all these ones that are harder to find now, but they were suddenly available, all these Star Wars fans, for a pretty good price and a good cost.
That's cool. By the way, I have a couple of copies of Dark Empire. We did Dark Empire, and we did a collector's item cover, original painting by one of the Star Wars artists way back when. I've got a couple copies. I don't sell them. I give them away. If anybody is desperate for one, you can have them contact me, and I'll give 1 or 2 away. I'm going to save a few for myself, but I'm happy to give out to people who are really rabid Star Wars fans.
Awesome. Well, we'll send them your way if we can.
All right.
So when you were doing these audio dramas, were you drawing direct inspiration? Were you drawing more from, say, what the book side was doing, or what Brian Daley did in the 80s with his NPR, Star Wars and the Empire Strikes Back?
It's interesting. I was going straight off of the source material, and then really doing what I hope. I like to think of myself as good at my job. I hope I'm good. But what any good adapter does is you understand the storyline and the characters, and you make changes where the medium demands it. And the same thing with somebody adapting a book to a movie. It's not always done well, but you recognize when the story can work better because you have media to work with that the original writer didn't, and you understand where you have to make changes because the original medium works better. For instance, taking turning something into an audio play, I have all the advantages of adding sound effects, right, and adding tone of voice that the original writer doesn't have. But what the writer of a comic book has is he has expression, he has coloring, he has all the mood that can be created by the graphic artist working with him. So there are moments when I have to fill in dialogue when the comic book can use just a look on somebody's face. And there are times when I have to actually sort of cut back on the writing that the original author did because I can use sound effects instead.
Is it challenging to adapt a comic book, a mainly visual medium, to a fully audio medium when you were doing these?
I'll tell you, objectively and subjectively, it can be, if the writing is good, it is easy to do. Because if you look at really good comic book writing, graphic novels, and I consider some of the Star Wars stuff to be that way. Some of it was really quite good. If you look at it, it is excellent writing married to great visuals. And I could go on about this forever because I'm a big fan of graphic novels in general. But when it's done well, it is certainly, obviously, it's different from a movie, but it has movie-type qualities. There's a fascinating storytelling in visual and text. But I would say that really good comic books and really good graphic novels, they don't ignore the text for the sake of the visuals. They marry them together. So I really had pretty decent source material to work with.
Okay. Were there any points, things that you can remember, since it's been a while, that you wish you could have included that you just couldn't find to work in audio? Because I've been making my own audio plays because I love radio dramas. I grew up with the BBC ones and the NPR ones and your ones, actually. And there's sometimes just some things that you just can't really make work well enough in audio for it to get the point across. So is there anything that you wish you could have included in some of those series that you just couldn't get to work, even though you really wish you could have?
Sure. I mentioned the visuals. if you look at Dark Empire, for instance, and even Tales of the Jedi. Tales of the Jedi was a little bit more of a comic. Dark Empire. No offense to Tales of the Jedi, but that was done more as a regular comic book. Dark Empire was done as more of a limited series, so a little more attention was paid to the look of it. And it's the look of the characters. Star Wars is about the appearance of things as well as the sound of things. And there are times when I had to find some way, and frankly, the actors more than I had to find some way to get the feeling of a person, the physical presence of some people across when there's no visual there. And I'm not sure that was always possible. I think that's the one thing that the original, the NPR radio broadcast had. They could play off the knowledge that people had seen those movies. Whereas with Dark Empire, I couldn't always play off the fact that people had seen those comic books. So I think some of the physicality of some of the characters is tough to convey. You try and do it through dialogue and the actors.
Did you have cooperation with Lucasfilm so you could use sound effects or music that did you have full permission to use the stuff because that definitely helps create the sound of Star Wars?
Absolutely. I have a funny story about that. Like I said, I was a Star Wars fan like everybody, but I got to go up to Skywalker Ranch a few times to work on these projects and meet with them on various projects. And I remember before I'd ever actually been up into their big, industrial light and music section at Skywalker. I guess it was the origin of industrial light and music up at Skywalker Ranch. I called up there, talked to the licensing group, which I worked with, said we needed some sound effects. They transferred me over to the sound effects guys and in the studio. And I talked to this guy. I said, look, so I'm doing this radio play, et cetera, and Chewbacca's one of the characters, and I need some Chewbacca sounds. And he said, well, okay, can you narrow it down? I said, well, I mean, it's only a few things I need. He's not in a huge scene here, but I need some Chewbacca sounds. And honestly, maybe I need a couple of happy sounds and a couple of angry sounds. And the guy said, look, man, you should narrow it down because just in terms of angry sounds, we have 10,000 angry sounds for Chewbacca. And it just cracked me up because I thought, wow, they're really thorough.
Wow. 10,000 sounds?
Yeah, I bet they're exaggerating, but we actually went up there and they had thousands and thousands of sounds just for Chewbacca.
Wow, and I find it hard to, I find it good when I find 10. and then the music and so on was all good. And this was prequel era, so I imagine their sounds now, if you were to use it, they'd have, 10, 20 times as many as they had before.
Oh, I'm sure. And I mean, obviously, they're everything they do up there is state of the art. It's amazing. The mixing up there was, in fact, for the first couple of things we did, we went up there for the mixing. It was just unbelievable how, they are top notch.
When you make these things, I'm not sure if you ever look for, say, validation from Lucasfilm, but did they ever talk about how much they liked your audio dramas or what they thought about it, or the sound guys at least, since I know they always have opinions on things like this. Like, how was the reception to your audio work?
I don't know. Honestly, listen, the obviously everything we did was much lower, but minuscule budgets compared to the movies.
Yes. I
think given what we had to work with and our time frame was shorter, our budget was lower, I think they appreciated it. First of all, we got to use some of their sounds, so the sounds were going to be good. I know that they were very picky in the first run about the actors that we chose for the first couple stories. We had to go through several runs, and I recall the actors kind of being unhappy that they felt like they had to do kind of a second audition after being approved. But they all tolerated it, knowing that it was a Star Wars product. We were, I think, outside of the NPR broadcast, we were the first audio event outside the movies. Again, I'm not going to pretend we were a huge, huge deal to them, but there had not been a ton of audio type stuff in years. So they were really careful about the quality that we provided, and I think ultimately they were happy with it. At least they let us make more of them, so I assume they weren't too unhappy.
With the recent release of a lot of them again, with the Humble Bundle, have you by chance seen them pop up more and more in people's, just people talking about them recently, or have you not noticed any change in that yet?
I haven't noticed any changes. I wrote a lot of Star Wars stuff for a long time, and I'm always happy to talk about it, but I don't really track any of my own products. I was really thrilled to write them at the time, and I think ultimately they were happy with it. At least they let us make more of them, so I assume they weren't too unhappy. With the recent release of a lot of them again, with the Humble Bundle, have you by chance seen them pop up more and more in people's, just people talking about them recently, or have you not noticed any change in that yet?
Have you not noticed any change in that yet?
I don't really track any of my own products. I was really thrilled to write them at the time, and I'm happy to have any kind of life left over, but I don't really follow it.
So what caused the change? You did a lot of Star Wars in the 90s, and there was a lot of Star Wars products, a lot of, your audio company and so on. What changed to end that run?
Oh, nothing. Honestly, I mean, my relationship with Lucasfilm was great. I think it was kind of mutual. I wrote a bunch of stuff and was happy doing it, and then I moved on to some other projects that were fulfilling to me. And I mean, I recall talking to Lucasfilm at the beginning of my run with them. And frankly, I recall having a conversation with I think it was with Lucy Wilson, when they promoted the next 6. Like when they made a deal for the second 6 books in the Galaxy of Fear series, they said, John, look, we're happy to write these books, but we don't want one writer doing everything on any genre for Star Wars. And I think it was smart of them. You mentioned a couple of authors like Kevin J. Anderson. I don't know Kevin well. I met him once or twice on, meetings coordinating various licensing projects for Lucasfilm. Seems like a really nice guy. I know he wrote a lot of stuff for Lucasfilm, but I suspect that even with him, like, they were trying to branch out and keep any one author from being the Star Wars author. So I think it was kind of organic. I wrote a bunch of stuff, and then it was time for me to move on and time for them to find other authors.
And so I guess now we're going to move on to that. What have you moved on to beyond, of course, martial arts stuff? What have you done since?
Well, after that, I wrote a bunch of other books. Frankly, because of the Star Wars connection, I became for a while what's known as an author who's good at media tie-ins. I got recruited by a bunch of different publishers to write books that were connected to movies or other media. For instance, probably the biggest series that I wrote was the Jack Bauer series, the 24, the television show 24. I was asked to write 4 original novels based on Jack Bauer and the 24 series. That was fun. I wrote those. On the other side of my life, I've written a couple of martial arts books on the martial arts that I teach called Krav Maga, Israeli self-defense. I've written a couple of other science fiction novels, collection of short stories unrelated to Star Wars. Like I said, I kept writing well after the Galaxy of Fear series and the other stuff. I just, Star Wars was enough.
And so talking about Krav Maga, we've had other authors on, such as Steve Perry and others, who work their martial arts into their writing. Their martial arts helps become what they are.
Yeah.
Have you worked Krav Maga into any of your works before, or
Oh, yeah.
if you were to write a book now, would you be writing that into there as well?
Oh, absolutely. If you, for instance, the Jack Bauer novels that I wrote, the 24 novels, I never call it Krav Maga because even though if you look up the bios of some of the characters in 24, some of them done Krav Maga, there was no comment that Jack Bauer himself had done Krav Maga in his fictional bio, so I never said Krav Maga. But if you know the system, and it's very aggressive, it's very direct. It's more of a combat system than a martial art. It's not pretty. It's heavy on the martial, not so much on the art. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of that in there. I wrote several Zorro novels, if you're familiar with the character Zorro, and even though that's set in kind of 18th century, early 19th century Los Angeles, you can see a lot of Krav Maga in Zorro as well.
So my knowledge of Krav Maga is that it's an Israeli technique that the Mossad uses a lot. What exactly, for people who don't really know what Krav Maga is, what exactly
Sure.
would you describe it as?
It is, first of all, it's a self-defense, a defensive tactics system. It's a fighting system. It's the official system of the Israeli military. So everybody who goes through the Israeli military learns some Krav Maga. In fact, military service is compulsory there, so everybody in the country learns some of it. Now, if you go through boot camp, you learn a few weeks of it. If you go into a special unit in the military, you move on to the Mossad or their kind of paramilitary police force is called the Yamam. Those guys do a lot of Krav Maga as well. They're kind of the police unit, but they're the most militaristic police unit because they're the ones that go after a lot of terrorists. They use it. It's taught to over 600 law enforcement agencies in the U.S. The name Krav Maga is Hebrew, and it means contact combat. And it's very simple, very aggressive. It's a no-frills, efficient way to deal with threats on the street.
Okay, and what drew you to Krav Maga? Because if it's an Israeli one, what drew you to it, and then what got you to write the guide to, the ultimate guide to techniques for Krav Maga and write all these books for it?
Well, in terms of getting into it, there are two stories, and they're both true. One of them is that my wife and I were looking for a hobby together. This was back in 1991. We had just gotten married. We were looking for a hobby together, and a colleague of hers had been doing Krav Maga. That story is true. The other story is that I've been involved in a couple of really bad situations in my life, and I wanted answers to some questions about violence. I had a gun put to my head when I was younger. Like anyone else, I was in some fights when I was a kid, but a little bit later on, I was jumped by two guys after a pickup basketball game, and I had never been told that it's okay to throw the first punch. And I recall in the altercation realizing it was about to be a fight, but I should have thrown the first punch, but I didn't. And I wanted someone to tell me that when you're confronted with violence and you're sure it's going to become violent, hit him first. But I'd never been told that. I went to my first Krav Maga demo, and they showed me an actual gun defense that I knew would work based on what I had encountered. And during the explanation of what Krav Maga was about and how aggressive it is, the instructor said, and if you know it's going to be a fight, hit him first. And I thought, this is for me. I like this. I've been doing it ever since.
So, and so you've been doing it ever since, and what got you to write the guide? Because you'd think if it's an Israeli technique, the Israelis would be writing the guide.
Well, actually, there's a book written by one of the very, very original instructors, and I actually helped edit that book a little bit. But to answer your question, I became involved in it. Apparently, I was pretty good at it. I became an instructor. I just grew as an instructor and became, in the U.S., certainly one of the primary instructors in the whole country. If you care about this stuff, I am one of the best-known instructors in the world in Krav Maga. I teach people all over the world to become instructors. I feel like I'm bragging. I don't like doing this. I'm sorry, Jeremiah, but I have a lot of credentials in Krav Maga. I've trained a lot of military and police units over the years as well. So the organization that I was helping run at the time, we wanted to write a book, and we wrote. I was the primary writer of the book called Complete Krav Maga, and it became kind of the gold standard for Krav Maga material.
So you said you've last question about Krav Maga before we get to that one. So you said you traveled all the world and taught, police and military stuff. Does this include like going to Israel and teaching, working with Mossad or police or military there?
Not Mossad. I work with other military units there. The main place that I've gone to work is a place called Wingate Institute, which is the civilian home of Krav Maga. The founder of Krav Maga is a guy named Emi Lichtenfeld. He's passed away back in 1998. But after he created the system for the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and when he retired, he kind of installed Krav Maga training at this very, very high-end facility called Wingate Institute, and that's kind of where Krav Maga's home is in Israel. And I've been there several times. I've been to Israel several times. I've gotten to train with people. But the truth is, when I go to Israel, I don't go there to teach. I go there to improve myself. But in terms of other units, yeah, I've trained military units all over the U.S., a little bit in Europe, a little bit in Asia. For a couple years, I was one of our main instructors in Krav Maga. I'm a civilian, but I was one of the main instructors of Krav Maga for one of the Air Force's main anti-terrorist units. Yeah, I've been around.
Okay. So now there's a couple questions left from listeners. One wants to know, you've written child adaptations of stuff like The Mummy Returns for early readers. Has anyone ever questioned or wondered why they're writing children's adaptations of books movies that are not made for children?
No, honestly, I think it's, especially for something like that, it's an offshoot. Kids like, not to be scared, but kids like cautionary tales. If you look at fairy tales are terrifying. They are, especially the original versions of fairy tales. They're very scary. They're meant to be warnings to kids. Now, I'm not going to claim that The Mummy Returns or my adaptation of it is going to last the centuries like Goldilocks is, but kids like to hear stories like that. So I think it's a pretty natural event to take something that touches adults and I wouldn't say dumb it down, but simplify it for kids.
Okay, here's another one from a listener. They say, you've worked with Star Wars, you've worked with Digimon, you've worked with Planet of the Apes, you've worked with The Mummy, 24, and other major series. Is there a sci-fi, fantasy, or other series that you would give an arm and a leg to really want to work with, for, or write for?
You know, I did it with Star Wars. Had I not done Star Wars, answer that question, it would have been Lucasfilm. Yeah, that's it. I also got to write some stuff for DC Comics, and I got to write a few comic book adaptations for DC Comics. That was all fun stuff too. So no, I've been lucky enough to do it. I suppose it would kill my father if I didn't say Star Trek. I do like Star Trek, but between the two, if I had to choose, I would have chosen Star Wars, and I got it.
Excellent. This is okay. Well, this person sent 2 questions. He says, "Hey, what the heck? I'll just write 2 questions. First of all, since you read a lot in Star Wars, what color would your lightsaber be, and which side would you be on?"
Okay, I'm gonna show some of my ignorance in Star Wars. I actually have never followed. I've never followed the lightsaber color thing. It's on Facebook all the time because of my Star Wars connection. I get the pop-up meme, like which, find out what color your lightsaber is. I've never ever followed that. I don't know why. I never got into it. So I can't give an answer to that. I don't even know what a good answer would be. What was the other part of the question?
Which side would you be on?
Oh, absolutely. I would actually be on the side of the Jedi. I'd be with the Rebel Alliance. My Krav Maga, to connect all your questions, my Krav Maga organization, the organization that I run that teaches people all over the world, is actually called the Krav Maga Alliance. And I chose the name Alliance for that very reason.
Okay, so last listener question. December 18th, a little movie that probably no one's ever heard of called Star Wars: The Force Awakens is coming out. Will you be there?
Absolutely. I'm very excited. I think it's going to be great. I won't speak for anybody else listening, but I assume that a large number of people had some level of disappointment with the 3 prequels. I think everybody's looking for this next movie to be great, and I honestly think they're going to deliver. I really do.
So just a quick follow-up on your prequel comment, just because you did martial arts. I was just wondering, from a martial artist point of view, I'd imagine there was quite a bit to like in at least the action scenes in the prequels. Am I correct in that regard?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. Honestly, it was great. And I thought that I forget the actor's name, but the guy doing Darth Maul was unbelievable. And I actually, I thought it was fantastic. And I thought that everybody else kept up with them pretty well. And there's a comment about the third movie that I thought was brilliant when you had Hayden Christensen and what's his name? Who's the actor?
Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, Ewan McGregor. When they were talking about their battle, and saying that this has to be the best sword duel or lightsaber duel in movie history because of what it represents. And I thought he was right to make that comment, that it had to be that good, and I thought they totally delivered on it.
Fantastic. So this last question from us. We always give our guests a chance to have the soapbox at the end to promote any upcoming work appearances. Just promote whatever they'd like to, or say whatever they'd like at the very end. So we're going to give you the soapbox. You can promote yourself on social media, your martial arts alliance, your Krav Maga Alliance, or whatever you'd like to promote. You have the soapbox, and spout away.
Well, I'm not very big on self-promotion. I will say this, that I've got a couple books coming out. I'm working on another science fiction novel right now. If you check my Facebook page, it's John Whitman on Facebook, you will start seeing some comments about it. It should be coming out in the next 6 months. So if you want to follow up in a few months and see what's going on with that, please do. Otherwise, honestly, just enjoy what you're doing. Look forward to the next movie coming out. I know I'm going to be watching it, and I'm going to be having just as much fun as everybody else.
Okay, James.
What's up?
John Whitman. He's a guest I've actually been trying to go after for a while because, well, I liked Galaxy of Fear. I loved Galaxy of Fear. I actually got it from the library. I was reading it a lot, so I started buying it now. Because now they're like one of those books that are like 1 penny in Amazon. You just pay shipping.
Yeah. They're like, it's like, for some reason it doesn't cost anything, even though it should.
And as I mentioned on the interview, it's one of those books that who cares about canon with them?
Oh, seriously, it's just
you just
really
read
good.
them. They're just fun. They're really short, easy reads. They're good to read to kids. I'm probably gonna read them to the kids at work.
And that's the weird thing too, because you'd think something called Galaxy of Fear, not something for children, but not the case.
Yeah, Goosebumps was really popular, so Bantam or Lucasfilm with Bantam decided to do the same thing. It makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, no, I'm all for it, man. I'm all for it.
And recently they tried again with Death Troopers and Red Harvest, but I think Galaxy of Fear did it better.
No, I could agree with you on that one. I really could.
And as you noticed, he's done a lot of stuff with Star Wars that most people don't quite notice. And good thing there was that Humble Bundle recently, because that reminded me to try to get him again, because Tales of the Jedi and all those were on the Humble Bundle, which I got for $15.
Nice.
So I got all those radio dramas, good Star Wars radio dramas and audiobooks.
Oh, yeah.
Good stuff.
No, great. You'd be surprised how easy it is if you really want, some Star Wars, whether it be books, radio dramas, even audiobooks. If you take the time to look, you can find this stuff for dirt cheap, which is really weird because with everything coming out now, with the new movie coming out really, really soon, with the fact that we're getting all these standalones, the other sequels, the fact that Star Wars Land is, being built, you'd think that all this stuff would be at a premium. And you know what? Pretty soon it's going to be. So right now is definitely the time to try to start picking some of this stuff up if you're interested. Even if you're not, it's that kind of thing where it's too good not to.
Exactly. And for upcoming shows, just so you guys know, notice last week Steven and Steven on Steven did not happen.
No, it didn't.
There was a scheduling error, and so they're working on that. That's been recorded, and it should be ready to go this week, probably released tomorrow, being Sunday. And it's going to be E.T. E.T., the extraterrestrial. Hopefully the one with firearms and not walkie-talkies.
Yes, because as we all know, if you point a walkie-talkie at someone and hit the push-to-talk button, you will kill them with a bullet.
And then musical procrastination didn't happen last month. It should be happening this month, but we're going to be filling up as much stuff as possible this week. If you haven't already seen it, we're going to have an episode of BNN, which was recorded while I was gone, is out. And then we're going to record another one on Sunday, of course, released on Monday.
Oh, yeah.
I should be, this is out. So next week we should probably have Quentin Flynn awesome. Or Crispin Freeman. One of them will be out next week as we're going to continue an awesome month of quality podcast on Bombard Radio. Sorry for the last couple of weeks. We'll make it up for you this month.
It's been a little hectic.
We should also have coming up this month writer of tons of Star Wars stuff, Dan Wallace.
Ooh.
So lots of good Star Wars stuff coming up this month. It's a good time for it. And lots of good other shows. Hopefully tune in for Musical Procrastination, Steven and Steven on Steven, our Steven Spielberg podcast, and of course every Monday at 5 o'clock, BNN.
The Bombad News Network.
So thank you, James. Why don't you take us away?
I will, but first things first. I've got to make a little interjection. So, as you know, Jeremiah, my mom came down from New Jersey, and she wanted to go to Universal Studios, which was cool. I'm not going to get into too much, but funny moment happened. We decided to go do the Men in Black Alien Attack ride because she likes it. And we were doing, for anybody that knows, you kind of go through a little presentation thing and then, the interior line starts and yada, yada. Well, on the interior presentation, you've got this one guy who's making all these jokes and talking about, oh, well, this, that, the other thing about extraterrestrial life. And he asks a question. He goes, do you guys think that we'll find intelligent life on other planets? And when he asked that, there was dead silence for about, a second and a half. I took the opportunity and I said it. I just sit there and I go, man, we're still looking for intelligent life on this planet. Entire room exploded in laughter.
I didn't even know this ride existed.
Oh, yes.
So is this, being that it's Universal, it's like one of those like movie rides where you wear the 3D glasses and so on, like the Transformer ride or Star Tours?
No, this one, it's actually like a shooting gallery. You get into this 6-seater thing, like a little ride thing, and you have a little laser type of gun, and you literally shoot aliens and whatnot, trying to protect Manhattan, and it actually records your score.
So it's like the Buzz Lightyear ride.
Yeah, it really is. But
do you get to shoot a girl carrying a physics test book?
No, little Tiffany was not there. But I will say one thing: the one that was sneezing is in the movie ride. And for those of you that didn't know this, and Jeremiah, I'm very surprised at you because this ride has been at Universal for so long that the last time I went on it before this time was back in 1999.
I've only ever been to Universal once, and it was Islands of Adventure.
Oh, dude, this is like one of their staple rides. It really is, and it's been there for ages. But it's always fun. Me and my mother were like loving time to end. I know it's sad, but you know what? Just because we're ending this episode doesn't mean there won't be another episode very soon. I'm James, that's Jeremiah. We thank you for listening. Come check us out. You know how to reach us. Facebook, Twitter. It's all there. Do I really have to repeat it? If I did, I'd be disappointed. You can find the links just below everything of this episode. It's on the page. Check it out, bombadradio.com. Go there. Every link you need is right there. Like us on Facebook. Check us out follow us on Twitter. We're everywhere, all the time. That's just how we are. But we gotta go. So as always, may the Force be with you.
And of course, so long, and thanks for all the fish.